Hello and welcome, everyone, to a new episode of Tales and Tactics Beyond the Book, a show that breaks down the fundamental concepts of tabletop games and how we play them. I am your host, Max, and joining me, of course, is my co-host, Troy, and doing his thing to make it all sound good is our producer, Jay. And today's episode I wouldn't call it a philosophical concept, but it might touch on that. It is gaming mindset. And what the hell does that mean?
We will tell you what your gaming mindset is.
Yes, or with all hopes, you will figure that out for yourself. But
exactly.
We'll try to illuminate our own insights in a free-form discussion about such things. What do we mean when we talk about gaming mindset? Well, I think it can apply to a lot of different aspects of games. It can speak to the crunch of a game versus the looseness of its rules. It can speak to the specific themes that you are running. And it can go as far as to the people that you're playing with and how well you jive and get along with them. And I guess what are you might call the cultural assumptions of your gaming group. But Troy, tell me, what does that mean to you?
For me, the framing of your gaming is, it's how are you going to, it's as much what you want out of it as to how you're going to visualize the game itself happening. And for me, I'm very much motivated by campaign storytelling. That's my big thing, is I want to tell a continual story built up of smaller actions that lead to something greater. Maybe it telescopes, maybe it doesn't, but it's knowing the goal, and then it's finding the pieces you need to add up to your greater goal and having the right expectations about what these pieces can do for you. For example, not trying to do a World War II campaign only at company level, thinking that's going to give you some depiction of the conflict. You're going to need perhaps some company level play, but if you want a more holistic viewpoint on the fight, you may also need to incorporate other scales like platoon, battalion, division, whatever. So I think framing and setting expectations is incredibly important, whether it's a solo project because you have to entertain yourself, or if you're doing a group thing like cooperative play, competitive play, knowing the objective of this play, I think is the most important thing.
Yeah. I mean, I find mindset to be the make or break for a lot of people enjoying something new.
Right.
In any time where I've tried to get some people interested in... here's a good example is the differences between classic Battletech and Alpha Strike.
Oh, good example.
I feel that Alpha Strike exists to compete with things like Warhammer 40K, but with using the assets of Battletech.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That might be reductive, but in a lot of ways, I think that that's the incentive of why it exists. And I know that people enjoy playing it because it's effectively a casual, fast-paced game that uses the Battletech universe. My problem with it, and again, this might be my mindset, but my problem is not with Alpha Strike per se, but it's with people that are resistant to playing the classic Battletech game because they believe it to be too slow. But as I said, it's all about where you couch your perspective. It's how you set your expectations. If you look at it from a point of view that every decision that you're going to roll is going to tell you something about what's happening in the game, then it can actually be really exciting. You just have to kind of tune yourself into that. So to see if I hit with each weapon, yeah, of course, I have to roll for each weapon as I go through, and I have to go through and see where it hits and how much damage it does and go through a play of sequence. And I might have to watch somebody do that. Or I can think of it as a movie being played out scene for scene. The lasers fire, the rockets launch from the launcher. They hit, it hits this and that, and maybe there's an ammo explosion.
Yeah.
And it seems tedious when you look at all these steps, but when you actually get into it and relax and enjoy it for what it's delivering, it plays like an amazing movie.
It's like a forensic examination of an action scene.
Yeah, but I would agree that the time it takes to go through a turn sequence in several games, especially if you're not experienced, but even if you are, can take a lot longer than a round in Alpha Strike. right?
Yeah.
But in Alpha Strike, all I'm doing is moving a mech-shaped model a certain distance and then just doing damage to another mech-shaped model, which I record on a sheet. It's faster, sure, but it's not remotely as interesting, and it doesn't really, to me, show off what makes that game unique. Like if you take anybody who plays like Mech Warrior, well, they play Mech Warrior, and we're talking about the video games, whether they're the older Microsoft games or whether they're the current Piranha games,
right,
or any of the other companies that have ever taken a crack at it. What you expect is that I've got all these stuff on me and I can shoot all these things, and I also have this complexity. Well, it seems weird to me that there's a game that removes the complexity because people would get bored of it.
Like, what I would use Alpha Strike for is to get a campaign turn over with quickly, because that is your lens of focus, is the progression of the campaign. If you're trying to get the maximum experience out of the tactical engagements, Alpha Strike will leave you wanting every time. Like, I enjoy it and I've had fun with it for sure. I've played more than one campaign. So I have experience in Alpha Strike, and it can be very rewarding. However, this is something I said to Max earlier. I feel like if you were to run a 12v12 mech fight, like a company fight of Intersphere mechs in Classic and then in Alpha Strike, one would be a lot faster, sure. But the simulations are going to give you very different outcomes. And not just because of, I rolled a 6 this time, but more accurately, the way that it goes about portraying these elements is so different that they won't give you the same resolution. So one of them is like looking at Battletech through like a Carl Zeiss lens, and one of them's like looking at it through like a cell phone camera lens. Like there's a different resolution you're getting, resolution in terms of like fidelity, right? Through one way of interpreting the setting compared to another. And if all you want is to end the campaign turn to begin your next campaign turn, which is something I do a lot, Alpha Strike makes sense. Like it has a role. But what bugs me about it is I know when I play Alpha Strike, there is and this is just in my mind, but there is a truer interpretation of what's actually happening that I'm only playing the shadows at,
Yeah, and it's funny because you could say you might not even need to deal with Alpha Strike as a thing if you want turns to end in your campaign, because there are resolutions for tactical strategic level combat in Battletech. So you can actually not even start that part to see what happens.
Yeah, it's true. You could use ACS, like the Abstract Combat System, or you could use Battle Force or SBF, Strategic Battle Force. You could for sure do that. But the funny thing about Battle Force and Strategic Battle Force is they effectively become like Alpha Strike.
In a way, and I would say Alpha Strike is somewhat based on them in a lot of ways.
I think it is. I absolutely agree with you. Because it's like you can use the same Alpha Strike unit stats for Battle Force because it just breaks it down into the 2 tiers of armor and structure. I don't know how weapons work exactly because I haven't read it in ages, but that to me is something that's really important about your framing, right? Like we're talking about why would you pick what you pick? It's because of the goal you have to set out with. And for me, I want to do a Battle of Galtor, end of the Third Succession War. Kurita, Davian, industrial world, let's fight. And this is one of the big fights of the Succession Wars where there's like multiple regiments. So what I'm doing is New Delhi. It's the city on the west coast of the east coast, of the primary continent. And it's like there was a big regimental clash in this city. And it's like, I want to do that. And the question now becomes to me, in doing this, what is it that I'm trying to extrapolate? Do I want to know what happened to individual pilots? Or do I want to know what happened to military units? And what and why? So I need to address that in my own planning before I started, because I planned it as an Alpha Strike campaign. But now I look back at it and I'm like, if this is meant to be like gritty street fighting, that's way better in Total War.
And again, it's really like I think it's about setting your objectives. Because again, if you just wanted to play a mech game where you just want to throw down on a table at a game store with somebody and you didn't want a lot of a setup or explanation, Alpha Strike probably is the game to play.
Yeah.
I don't know that it gets you the exact experience, but it might still be fun, right? So there's that. And as I said, I'm not going to start disparaging mindset. I'm not going to be a hypocrite about this, because if I say, oh, your mindset isn't set into the alpha strike mode, then clearly I'm failing on my own part.
Right.
But what I mean is I view that thing as being a more of a beer and pretzels style of BattleTech.
Yeah.
And not something that's going to give me the hit by hit, play by play. I mean, of the sports that I enjoy, I like watching baseball.
Right.
So I'm perfectly fine with this setup, set, play rhythm. It's in a lot of things that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to try and take that mindset and essentially relax and just kind of go with it, right? Oh, go Jays, by the way.
Yeah.
There's other areas where your framing and your mindset can also have an issue, where it might be more around theming. And sometimes this is about the game master being clear about what the expectations of that thing are, which I do think is the game master's responsibility. I'm not one of these people that likes the table contract, because my preference is to do it more like the rating system on a movie.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you, I will propose to the people at play that this is an R-rated game. And it's going to contain these themes to some degree. And I might qualify that, like, it might imply some of those themes rather than explicitly state them.
Yeah.
And then it might say that some of them are more explicit. If somebody is like, well, I want to play in your game, but I don't, I'm not cool with these things, then it's like, well, then we can play some other time.
We'll do a different game that is for you. But if this is not for you, then that's fine. Like,
yeah,
it's okay to not like mushrooms, I guess is what I'm going to say. Like, if you love mushrooms and you're on your pizza, put them on your fucking pizza.
Yeah.
Just put them on there. But if you are someone who doesn't like them, that's fine. Don't have that slice of pizza. I agree. Like, my most successful GM experiences have been ones where I've been very forward about what I'm going to convey, but not how or why or what or all those things. Like, they'll leave a certain amount of mystery. There's certain lines that perhaps that like maybe are inappropriate to cross in different groups and stuff, right? And that is more about knowing your group than having a one-size-fits-all banner that says only these topics. Like, you know what I mean? It's more about understanding your group and understanding what the point of the game is. Because if you're playing Delta Green, like, you're going to have trauma in your game. And that's going to be a real thing, because there's literal mechanics for it. And if that makes players uncomfortable, it's not that Delta Green is bad or should be set on fire. It's just that it's not for them.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be clear in communicating what your game is about, but you're not obligated to appease people unless, of course, you're trying to negotiate those things out. But that's a process to deal with the people directly. But if I'm running a game at a store, I'm probably going to run something that feels more like it's PG-13.
Yeah.
Because my goal as the game master in that situation is to bring something that I know a lot of people will have an easier time getting into. But if I'm running a serious game and I say, I'm running Delta Green, like you were saying, or I'm running it's like going back to our previous episode about Chronicles of Darkness, I'm running a grim and gritty Chronicles of Darkness that touches on themes of trauma, blah, blah, blah. As long as I'm upfront about that, I don't need to negotiate. If it's not for you and you think that you're going to have these things, you can ask me more questions, of course, as to like, well, how often that is. And that might be hard for me to describe, but I'll do my best to say, yeah, it's got this and that, and you're probably going to have to deal with these things. And if you're not comfortable with it, then, we can play D&D some other night and you'll still have a great time, right? I don't want to subject you to anything you don't want, but I also don't want to compromise on the game that I'm going to run. It can be bad with those expectations either way, right? Like I know some inexperienced GMs don't know about what they might have in their game. And then it feels like a bit of a gotcha to some of the players.
Right.
And these are just mistakes that happen when you're learning to do these things. War games tend to have a different level of, I guess, expectation setting, which in some cases I find for the most part in mindset is friendly game ?
Yes. Is this secretly a competitive clash of wills, or is this a fun game? Also, in terms of, are we allowed to have silly names or not?
Sure. And it doesn't have to necessarily be all one way or the other, especially when it comes to how competitive you're playing.
Yes.
But it's important to know that you're getting into a competitive mindset, right? Like, If we're playing Chain of Command, are we approving a certain point limit, but hiding the units until they're deployed, right? So that the other person can't see what we're going to drop. That's a different game than, oh, I've got all my stuff spread out here. Oh, you can put that church over here. It might be fun to put the town a little closer to me. All right. That's a different game. Still fun, but it's more cooperative.
Yes.
Yeah, I find a lot of the themes where this comes in contention is like, especially for role-playing games, it's the theming of the game.
Right.
So is it a comedy game? Like, if we're playing Paranoia's got a lethality higher than Call of Cthulhu, but it has a completely different mindset as to what death means in that context.
Yes.
Or if you're playing Toon, if people still play Toon, then death isn't even permanent.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people who play Toon.
I don't think anymore, but no, I'm kidding. Maybe.
I don't know. There's some pretty hard, like I've met people who, as I said, I've seen people who still play Car Wars.
Yeah, right on.
The way that it's played in the book and with like all like, and they've got the scale down and all that. But anyway, that's off topic. The point is that like something like being killed in one game could mean something very different from being killed in another game. And I'm using just one of the most obvious things that happen. And then sometimes it's a little less clear in that sense because, say, different editions of Dungeons and Dragons, you would expect them to have a similar theme and expectation, but a lot of it does come down to one, who's running it at any given time.
Yeah.
And we have references to these, like, what is it? The Monty Hall dungeon, right? Like that one guy who's going to give you all the cool loot, and it's just going to be like, look, we're going to just take out tons and tons of gold and there's going to be no challenge to it at all. And then you also have those like just slaughter dungeons, like Tomb of Horrors.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, it's like mostly save or die. And then from that, you also have other editions so that like 5th edition, it's nearly impossible to permanently kill somebody.
There's like a million there's like narrative deflections, there's potions and there's spells, there's just so much. And like that's like in a game where it's all about taking a character and putting your heart into it and making them the magical version of yourself, maybe that makes sense to an extent, but it's quite a departure from like D&D has changed a lot, and it's changed in response to the players a lot. And it's like there was a version of D&D where death was expected and anticipated, and now it's like reviled, as like this, either it has to be like a critical role worthy moment of drama, or it's something that's a major letdown. And like I get it, I've played a long form Call of Cthulhu campaign. I know what it's like to lose a character that you've had for 6 months. Like I know that pain.
You knew that was going to happen.
I had that expectation that was built into that game. And I feel like it's funny how D&D in its current iteration is much more like, is a much different beast than it previously was. And it's like, it's trying to match the expectations of a new audience. Not that that's necessarily a foolish thing to do, but they've really, I think, lost a lot of the people who had that initial expectation. And there arguably are better games now than just playing one classic format. There's lots of great games. Like if you want probably the best gritty fantasy game, you'll hear it from me and Max all the time. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition. Like that's probably the best way to have a gritty fantasy adventure. It has the survivability. It has the monsters, the magic. There's diverse and fascinating species backgrounds and complicated political arrangements. Like it's everything you could want out of a gritty fantasy setting. So it's like, instead of trying to play D&D all the time and make that be the thing you want it to be, it's almost like assess your expectations, find what's core to them, and see what actually is addressing that. And that's what happened with me in D&D. Like I played 3.5 for years when I was younger, did a little bit of AD&D when I was much younger. But when I got into 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I was like, oh, this is the beast. This is what I want. Because it has a setting that I was related to as a wargamer, right? But it's much more than that. Like there's a lived-in capacity to that world and a threat level that I find so intriguing. Like everyone's just trying to make it. You know, there is like, you'll never run into a barkeep that's like, oh, I got my magical dagger in my boot from when I was an adventurer. You would never run into something quite so troped out or silly as that. You would always run into like this gritty guy who's missing his teeth, you know, and he's got an ugly beard, and he's like, what can I get you? You know, and it's like that level of it's like, pardon me, that type of story is the type of story that my fantasy brain goes to. So that's what I want. You know, or I go very mythopoetic and I'm like, give me all that Tolkien stuff. But like when it comes to like a non-Tolkien fantasy, I want some dirt under my fingernails. You know, I don't want to feel like a superhero. And that's where my expectations are set. And that's why when I just recently ran 5th edition, I had a lot of fun with my players. But I really found like that doesn't match the core of what I'm trying to deliver as a GM or to receive as a player.
Except, and again, going back to the whole mindset framing thing, except if I want to play a superhero game.
Right.
Weirdly enough, in our experience, we don't like our fantasy games to necessarily be superhero games.
Right.
We don't necessarily make that association, but that doesn't mean that I don't like playing superheroes, right? But my mindset shifts toward that thing.
Yes.
And I find that practicing this mentality of shifting your mind doesn't mean that you'll run any old thing if you're not into it, because no one wants you to run something if you're not really feeling it. But it does open up the door to play more stuff. Like, for instance, as an example, I've been following the Draw Steel campaign, which obviously is now published and is a thing that you can get. A little expensive. I haven't bought it yet, but it's there. It's not my cup of tea from what I've seen, to run that. I don't think I would probably play it, because you know what? I could adopt that mindset from a player's point of view, and I might even have fun with it. Who knows? Not the sort of thing that I'd want to invest a lot of my time planning and putting together, because it's not the fantasy that I crave, but I'm willing to humor it to the point of enjoyment. So I think it has to do with a lot of it has to do with the level of investment that any one person is willing to put into that. So as I said, like, you may not be the sort of person that wants to play like OG Battletech, but you might want to be the person who's willing to play that game if someone was there and ready to set it up and run it for you. I think that's the sort of the goal that I'm trying to like encourage in people when you are playing stuff. It's like you don't have to buy all the books for something that you don't know that you'll even like. But there's no harm in trying it out. And the best way to try it out is to try to understand the mindset of the people who enjoy it.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that everyone is always going to be into that or capable of doing it, but it's always worth a shot, right? And there's no shame in saying, like, even partway through, yeah, this isn't really doing it for me. Or you can even half step that and be like, what am I missing here? Because this is where I'm at. And then hopefully if the person you're playing with is articulate and experienced enough, they can be like, well, yeah, like, it's obviously slow, but if you focus in on each thing that's happening, it can actually be quite exciting even when your opponent's making the move.
Yes, totally. My favorite Battletech Classic moment is when Max punched my Battlemaster in the face and critted my pilot to death, dropping an otherwise perfect mech onto the ground for him to salvage. And it was just like, it wasn't my turn, but the level of detail and interest and the ramifications on our games that has is so cool.
It took a few like phases of like calculation to be like, is that what happened? But then like there's the anticipation. Is that what happened?
Yes, exactly.
We were both in kind of disbelief because I think I fired a Gauss through like a fresh mech and got a headshot.
Yeah, it was one of those games where my mechs were made out of paper.
The fact that was on the table was like, oh, right. Damn, that can happen. Right. And then the rest of the game had to play out that way. And then I think I had, was that the one we were doing a clan fight as well? Yeah, we were doing both clan stars against each other. And then I tried to alpha strike with my Hellbringer and he basically had a melt.
Yes.
So tit for tat.
Tit for tat. Yeah. You got it.
And or like what kind of, like, as I said, with like war games we were mentioning, like if we're playing like bolt action or chain of command or something like that, like, how are we setting up the table? Is it like, are we going to play this like hard competitive where we might have a procedure for adding terrain? Or are we just going to kind of be like, you know what, it might be cool like this? My favorite method to that is be cooperative in how it plays, but then use arbitrary rules to determine what side is the attacking side and who's on which side.
Yeah.
Because then you can just play make a model village, and then suddenly you might not be at the advantage. Like both sides are like trying to make it so that like it doesn't matter which way you come in, you're going to be okay. And then you'll only really know once your side is determined.
Once the bullets start flying. And that's why, like this is kind of a bit of a side. That's why I like the patrol phase in Chain of Command, is it kind of gives you this opportunity to pre-game on the table and sort of get a feel for like, no, this is a bad way to advance. I'm not advancing this way. Like it almost allows you to demo your table a little bit to see if it's, and I like, not that you're going to do a patrol phase and stop and be like, wait a second, this is a bad table. Re-rack. You won't do that. But like, it'll teach you about the table as opposed to times where I've like set up a table and started a game and been like, oh yeah, that's an open fire lane. I didn't realize that. Okay, well, I guess red team's in a lot of trouble. Like, you know what I mean? Like in Chain, you can more adeptly identify that in the patrol phase than some other games, which is nice. And I love a collaborative table build. But what me and my primary World War II opponent, Darren, do is I will set the table or he will set the table, and then the other player will basically, like, as appropriate, fight across it. You know what I mean? So it's like one person makes the table, but the other person gets to make a few key decisions. Like, okay, I'll start on this side of the table and I will be attacking, and that is my objective. So it's not like one person is just, I made an entire thing that I hope is balanced. It's like I made half the pie and now I baked the cake and now you dress it with the icing, I guess is the better analogy.
Yeah. Or you offer them like initiative for like deployment.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's a lot of ways that you can resolve, but yeah, like I think it's about having that conversation when you get into something and being upfront as to like, this is totally like a chill thing, or this is like a super simple game, but that's why we're playing. As I said, I don't have any specific problem with playing Alpha Strike if I'm just like at the store and people have got it out and they ask me to play and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I'll move some models around, I'll throw some dice.
Yeah.
And I know that it'll be over in 30 minutes anyway, so
yeah.
You know, I'm not too pained for it, but I also don't abandon my own personal taste in that sense. I know that I'm more personally like that. I can smell the heat or the ozone running off the plasma coils.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you know, I can feel the heat from the laser going off. Right. Like I'm adding those embellishments. All I'm doing is actually just going through the procedure of firing first large laser.
Yes. Right.
Where did it hit? In your leg. But like the story that goes through my head is like, oh wow, this, then this, then this. Or like if I'm doing an alpha, it's just like, all of it, you know? And then you can kind of like narrate, right? Like, I mean, role-playing games I always find work better if you share your thoughts as well as roll your dice. It's a give and take. Sometimes you've got to, like, I tend to be a very narrative GM. So I don't mind jumping into the controls about telling you how you just slashed that guy's head off.
Yeah.
But if you're the sort of person that wants to tell me how it worked out, we just have to kind of figure that. We just let me know ahead of time. Right? I got no problem with that. I might have to be like, oh, right. It's on you, man. You go for it.
Yes.
I think that people should play more games, even if like, I mean, I say this about all art, right? Like you should enjoy more art. Even if you find that it's terrible, it'll at least help you distinguish what you like, right? If you only ever stick with one thing, you'll never know whether you like anything else or not. Maybe you'll hate it, but you won't know.
Yeah, well, part of this that I want to tell people to take on as a listener is to try a game you've never played before. Like what that maybe like that's something I do for a lot of my gaming friends is like I introduce them to new games because I'm playing like 9 or 10 games at once. So I'll introduce them to be like, come check out this Napoleonic game with me. And we'll play a game or I'll play it on stream and have that like, you know, I'll live stream to a remote friend and use the camera to like show the action and they can tell me like, move those grenadiers over there, you know, stuff like that. But I find it really interesting to try new things and to share new things, because if you're sharing something that you know to someone new, they'll also be able to give you back insight that you don't have, you know? the collaborative process doesn't just simply exist in like, oh, we're telling a story together now. It's like sharing the rule sets and the experiences with each other as a gamer can also make you a more enriched gamer.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I said, you don't have to like fully invest in something that you're not certain about. In fact, it's the best way to find out whether you are certain about it. And I find with most games that I play, I usually figure out if they're well designed, I usually find that they work really, really well. If they're not well designed or not as well designed, I might miss some of the nicer aspects because they're a little bit hard to pin down because they might not show themselves until later. But I think that that's pretty rare. I'm trying to think of an example because obviously I thought of it, so it must be something I've encountered. But for the most part, yeah, the context will be pretty obvious as to like where this is going and whether you're going to like it or not. And sometimes it's also the people you play with. So it's often worth trying it with different people in different circumstances. But, you could still stick with what you know. Like, that's why it's great to have a gaming store or online if you can connect and play role-playing games through that. It's great. Or tabletop simulator if you've got the time and the know-how to set that up. I find that you can get a lot of enjoyment out of something by just kind of like managing your own expectations and just kind of being like, yeah, I wouldn't normally play this, but I might have fun. I mean, there's some stuff where like, this is not exactly the best sort of thing, but like the best example because it has to do with me setting up a game, which to be fair, I haven't run yet, but my wife is a big fan of Sailor Moon.
Nice.
And I introduced her to the fact that there is a fairly old at this point Sailor Moon role-playing game using the Tri-Stat system.
Yeah, there is.
She was like, oh, I'd be willing to play that, blah, blah, blah. So I started setting up a campaign and I weirdly had a lot of fun interpreting the lore of the show because that book is quite good at like having that. I was like, oh, wow. Like I remember watching it when I was like a kid because it was on and I was like, huh, actually there's a fair bit to this. I think you could shape this to be, and it was like, I was getting into something that I had no expectation of thinking about playing. Right. And I was like, oh, actually this could be a pretty epic campaign. So there you go. Like, you find it in the most unexpected places. As like with film, it's a lot of the same stuff, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to watch this really weird and abstract movie that I don't understand. It's like, yeah, understanding might not be the thing you need to do in that context. Maybe you just relax, see what it does, and then make up your mind at the end. You might make up your mind halfway through. That's cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other circumstances where like the mindset coming in really, really affects that game. Okay, here's an interesting point that might come to this. What happens when the game, as we were mentioning with different editions of Dungeons and Dragons, but this is true of a lot of our games. What if the game doesn't set your expectations right?
Oh, see, that I have definitely had where I've sat down to play a game thinking I would get, like, for example, one-page rules. It tells you this is a super, like, maybe that was my expectation, but one-page rules is like, here's a simple way to play, wink, not 40K. And I was like, I've got 40K models, let's get to it. And then I found it to be altogether too simple to the point of it not really having any interactions that grabbed my attention. And it's like, I still expected there to be a game here, to put it bluntly. And was that my expectation, or the game failing to communicate what it was truly doing? Because that to me is the most like beer and pretzels of beer and pretzel wargaming. And I just feel like there's so many better options to play with your 40K models than that. Even though they're going their own way now and they're creating their own factions and 3D print lines, like they're doing their thing, which is cool. But like, I just found those rules didn't do it for me. And I wanted something that was like, I could take some of the stuff I was doing in 10th edition when I still played that and just reduce it down, make it less insane, like less bullshit to track, pardon the language, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was me or the game, but there was definitely a break in expectation because I thought there would still be more game experience than what I ended up having. And I've played 3 campaigns. I did a Star Wars Legion campaign, I did a 40K campaign, and I did an Age of Fantasy campaign with some old Age of Sigmar models. So I've played the heck out of one-page rules, and I had fun. But playing some of the like equivalent other titles from other like indie scaled developers. I've had an absolute blast, like way more fun with some of the Nordic Weasel stuff, for example, as you know, as we've talked about them.
And yeah, I remember playing, like, you introduced me to the one-page rules. And in fact, I was even over at your place when we tried it out. And it was clearly catering to a different set of interests. And I always found there was that moment of realization where I was like, this is what someone wants out of this game. They want it, like, and then it's sort of like, well, what are they deriving the enjoyment of? Is it the streamlinedness, the competitiveness? Like, do you want to play a game to play it so that it is then over?
And that can be said of Alpha Strike.
That's true. Yeah, like I sometimes wonder what the mentality of certain gamers is. Like, I understand that there's like a need to not have things carry on for hours and hours and hours because, you know, we all have to go home and we have lives and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But my other thought is, well, what sort of experience do you actually want for the time you're getting out of it? Do I just want to feel like I'm moving pieces around and rolling dice? I guess for some people, that's totally fine. Or do you want like chains of consequences and unexpected outcomes and things? I mean, some people want a really clean, tight strategy game like chess where there like are no dice. It's not super common in wargaming, but there are a few games that I've heard of that work that way.
Well, like, for example, there is a Sam Mustafa game set in the civil wars of Rome where you have a hand of cards and all of your attack outcomes are known to you. You pick when to use them. So it's like, I have a definitely win the battle hand, so I'm going to play that now. But I now know in my next combat phase, I'm going to have to play my poor hand and lose that one. So that's like another way to do it. I think that really suits a competitive game at heart where you're not letting chance just dictate to you your outcomes. Like, you are deciding on your outcomes with the resources in front of you.
There's no reason that a game like that doesn't have to be fun. But then there's sort of like, well, what is the type of fun that you expect to get from that? Or going back to another previous episode, like the fun that some people get out of reenacting something.
Right.
As opposed to finding the niche within that space to find your own story. And some people really don't like one and really like the other. I mean, I have a bit of a preference, but I wouldn't be opposed to like playing out the battle. Like I own Avalon Hill, like Waterloo, and I find it enjoyable.
No, I totally get it. Like, I have a lot of fun with like some of the Napoleonic big battles where you're like looking at Quatre Bras and you're like, how would I do that myself? You know, like, sure. But when it comes to playing a historical game, my expectation, what I bring to it is that I really want to fill in the blanks. You know what I'm saying? We talked about this earlier a bit, but like, I'm really interested in finding out like, what do we not know about? And maybe my battle is that fills in that, like, whoa, we don't know what happened on September 14th. Cool. I will do the September 14th battle, and now we will know.
Yeah,
and it's not true, but it's my campaign truth, we'll call it. And I really like that.
To some people, not knowing those things is a frustration that's not worth the headache because they don't know enough about what's going on, and that's where they're deriving the interest of what they're doing. I mean, I'm more about like the creativity of storytelling, but also not having full control. So I like randomness, provided I can still make meaningful decisions.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of what we're getting into is what our own preferences are, but like that's sort of inevitable. I think it's mainly to get people to think more critically about your preferences and being like, well, I think I absolutely dislike this one thing, but like, I always give the caveat whenever we're doing a Rules as Written episode that when I have played this game and when I have read this game, or at least I try to be clear about that, because sometimes I'm just viewing it from the analytical view of a game designer and I'm sharing my thoughts as to like the unique mechanics because that's the thing that I think is interesting.
Yes.
But I know for a fact you don't really know how that works unless you actually play it. Right. And we are trying to play more games on this channel. It's hard to find the time, but I also want to just show off a lot of cool games.
Yeah.
So those are our goals. But I wouldn't be able to do that and even know that had I not tried a lot of games to begin with. I always find it, I think the strangest person to me is the person that only ever plays one thing.
Yes, I get that.
I mean, maybe we're the wrong people to critique that because we're the complete opposite.
Play like 50 games and we're always looking for new ones. Yeah.
I'm usually trying out like 5 things at once.
I know, me too.
And some of them are the same game 2 different ways. I tend to put more time into things that I'm getting more feedback or investment from, and I might just shelf things I'm not going anywhere with. But it's so weird to me that someone would just be like, yep, I play this, and that's the only game that I play.
It takes either a certain craziness or a certain discipline.
Yeah, like, that's amazing. I mean, I'm glad that you can get so much enjoyment out of one thing, but how do you know? And in some cases, it often turns out that they maybe had a bad experience with trying something else, or they just have that particular comfort level for one level of complexity, and the rest of their, this is the one indulgence they have in gaming more generally, that they're not a gamer ostensibly out of that field. So I don't know. Like, I don't want to judge people on matters of taste because I can't.
I get that.
It's not particularly possible. I also find it weird when people do that. They'll like gripe on and on about like that game's stupid or that's the wrong way to play. Like I had a critique about saying like I don't like Powered by the Apocalypse games generally. I've tried a couple that were okay. I could certainly think of games I enjoyed more that delivered on the same thing, but I wouldn't disparage anyone for being totally hardcore about, Apocalypse World. If that's what works, that's fine. I mean, we probably won't be playing that together, but it might give me some insight into what sort of mechanics you might like.
Yeah, true.
But it's not my job to please other people.
No.
I'm pretty firm on that point. And I'm not going to go after anyone either. So, because that just seems like a waste of energy on my part. I know like people get really passionate about stuff and it's like, oh, that's, I got, this is the end and be all. But I think especially as you get older, you find that that's either that's wrong and that's wrong, or it's just not worth the trouble of making the argument.
Yes, right. I would say, thinking about this now, when you want to find something that you're not doing, do you like to dive in or do you like to research it a lot? Like, are you someone who lets your expectations be informed by the thing that you're dynamically interested in? Or do you like to research the heck out of it first to know if it will meet your expectations? Because I'm definitely the research first kind of person who will like kind of read a lot about stuff in advance and decide if I think it'll meet the expectations that I already think I know I have.
I would say I'm generally on the same side of that. I sort of look for the context clues that will give me the idea of what the experience is. So like my favorite example of that experience is with Draw Steel. So I respect Matt Colville as a designer. I think he and I share at least some experiences in gaming, and so I always find his insights really interesting. But then the game that he made is not at all the game I would have made. And I don't think there's any problem with that either. But it did catch me a little off guard because I had to look into it in order to figure that out. But I also know that I won't know if that game is fun unless I actually try to play it. But I'm also not going to go out of my way to try to play it because I'm often doing a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So if I see the opportunity to try, like this would be true of like Daggerheart as well.
Okay.
That's a game that doesn't immediately strike me as having the tone. And again, I'm, as expressed in the previous episode, I am not in principle against narratively driven games where the mechanics play to the beats of the story or whatever. But from what I can understand, it doesn't quite hit that for me. However, if someone were running it and I felt comfortable enough in that group to try it, I probably would try it, and it might even be enjoyable. But I know that there's some matter of assumption on my part that that's not exactly the thing that I would look for.
Yeah, yeah.
And it really does come down to the specifics. Like I have to actually, like you were saying, like dig into the material and be like, okay, like maybe I'm wrong about this, or maybe there's something I'm missing. Like as we were saying with like 1-page rules, I was really surprised how simple it was.
Yeah.
And like, oh wow, like this is, I mean, maybe it's in the name and I should have picked up on that. That could be bad on our part, but
That could be us.
I was like, oh, that's it? What was the good part?
Yeah.
I just felt like I was moving plastic models into positions, rolling a die, adding a simple modifier, and then that other model was removed from the table. Or wasn't. It didn't have enough outcomes to pull me in. It did not suspend my disbelief in a game.
Yeah, I get you.
But it made me question whether people look for that in the first place.
I think some people game with the expectation that they're going to tell a story or they're going to have an event happen or it's going to have some like mental imagery. But other people just play it to lack of a better term, blow off steam, to chat with their friend, to have something to do with their hands while they're otherwise chilling out. And I respect that. Like, I don't think I'm doing something greater than that by the fact that I like to take hobby notes and like write a little log of my play. Like, I don't think that's a superior way to play, but it's absolutely the way that I will do it.
Yeah, it's eye-opening when you try something and you're like, oh, now that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And sometimes that's a good thing. Like, as I said, reading through this Chronicles of Darkness, I'm like, oh, wow, this mediocre game actually looks like an awesome game now.
Yes.
But sometimes it's like, oh, this thing that looked awesome is actually kind of mediocre to me. I don't know. Yeah, I think my rule is that like you can get a sense of something, whether you're going to like it by doing a lot of research. Try not to overinvest. From my own experience, having bought all 3 core rule books for 4th edition on the day of launch and hating the game.
It can happen.
Yeah, it taught me a valuable lesson. Certainly a financially heavy lesson. Though, to be fair, I was able to sell them soon enough that I could pick up. I don't remember what I picked up. It's probably a White Wolf game because I was getting more into that in parallel. I wouldn't overinvest. I would definitely do your research, but you also have to hold back that caveat that I don't know what that thing is unless I'm actually playing it. It's hard to say you shouldn't trust a reviewer that doesn't explicitly say what their relationship with the product that they're reviewing is. And that may include sponsorship from said product as well.
Right.
But as I said, we try to be clear as to saying we are looking at the math in the book and the words versus this is based on an experience. Or if it's somewhere in between, like I've played a different version of this, then the insight would be stated up front. At least that's something we try to do going forward if we failed to do that in the past. Yeah, it's tough because it definitely gives you a different perspective. Sometimes you look at some rules and you're like, that makes no sense. That's stupid. And then you try it and you're like, oh, that actually does make sense, but not in the way that I thought it did. Yeah. Well, actually, that was like Chain of Command's patrol phase for me. I'm like, that's weird. Why is this so complicated? And then after I went through it a couple times, I'm like, oh, that actually is, it makes sense. But more than that, it's more interesting.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Or it creates an unexpected outcome, which creates a more interesting mid and late game.
So when I am playing, I'm really trying to get a narrative and get a story out of it. And things that fail to deliver that to me, whether that be a specific narrative in the game or the outcome of the game as furthering a campaign narrative, I still need that narrative payoff. Like I've tried to play X-Wing when it was still a thing, and it was really fun, but it was so much a competitive duel, like a contest of will between you and the other guy trying to make the most optimized move every turn, that I didn't feel like you got good story moments all that often. You know, like you would almost get, I feel like this happens in modern 40K, where people do things that are like substandard narratively, but have a higher, greater narrative effect. Mechanical effect. So like, oh, I'm going to position my troops in a way that looks silly or goofy, but technically my +2 therefore justifies it. And that kind of grates against my sensibility where I want the table to look good.
Well, here's an example of framing that I've given to you is that we were talking about D&D and I was talking about running the game that I'm running presently And before that, when we were spitballing ideas about playing and you were telling me about your 5th edition game, you were talking about the idea of doing substandard moves on purpose because it was implied or built into your character, or it would be more dramatically interesting.
Right.
And I agreed with you in that context. But then when I told you about the game that I was running, which was going to be much more old school, I was like, don't do that. 1, you won't need to do that. And 2, you'll die.
I think that's so true, yeah.
But I made a distinction to you, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, I know, like, I totally think that that's fun to do in the game that supports that style of play. But if I am playing a hardcore dungeon crawler, you probably don't want to do that. And beyond that, you don't need to do that. Like, failure is going to find you.
Yeah, like I've played role-playing characters like suboptimally, you know? And that's been a way that I've gone about it to like add more interest to a character in a setting or in a system where otherwise it's like you kind of get what you want. You might fail some checks, you might take some hits, but you're not going to die. You're not going to lose the quest. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm going to do something risky. I'm going to drop my shield and walk forward to duel the goblin leader. And everyone's like, why would you do that? But it's cool. And my character would do it. You know, like that's fun sometimes, but you're absolutely right. If you're playing like OSR or some of the original D&D, like that'll get you killed.
Actually, well, we're coming closer to the end, but I mean, hey, let's put a little extra juice in this tank. Metagaming is a mindset.
It is.
How much? In what context? Sometimes you are playing your character and sometimes you are playing the game through your own actions or your own thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it's always productive to be super strict on that point, but there are certain conventions, like almost always the worst kind of metagaming is that if your character's not in the room, you can't tell people what they ought to be doing. Well, no, that's not true. You can talk about what they ought to be doing based on what you know their character knows. And again, I'm talking about a very specific game. Some tables won't allow that at all, but I can't be in the room. I can't have snuck around to the next room, see the Umber Hulk, and then been like, hey, everybody, there's an Umber Hulk in this room. Watch out.
Yes, totally.
That, I think, is the obvious level of, like, don't do that. But then there's other things where it's like, well, I know that this thing is Beholder, but my character might not know that it's Beholder. Maybe it's more fun if I act like I don't know what that is. And sometimes the GM will play the other side of that and not tell you that it's a Beholder. They may just describe it. In fact, I find the fine art, and this is funny because I'm not a huge fan of this game mechanically, and it is a bit of a gotcha game, at least when it came out. But Metamorphosis Alpha is, to me, the fine art of describing things that you know in ways that you can't understand.
Yeah.
That's a unique talent that is exercised well in that game, but is a skill that I think all GMs should probably have some ability, because you're going to avoid your metagaming problem by a lot if you just don't call the thing by the name. If you describe it and you find really interesting where there's context clues as to what it is that's going on, you're not just flat out saying, oh yeah, you get surrounded by like 3 mind flayers. It's like, well, have these characters ever seen a mind flayer? Well, no. Or another one is, from the player's point of view, intent, like declarations of intent. You know, how weasel wordy or how specific from the player's point of view. And also understanding the norms of like what you're going to get away with on the GM side. Like, are you going to treat it like a wish spell, right? Where you're going to say, oh, well, you didn't look in that specific spot, so, you know, the poison dart trap got you. Again, it really comes down to like the table you're playing at. But yeah, I think that there's a framing of expectations around that like it's really all about communication when it comes to table stuff. And then when it comes to games, it's about doing your research, but always leaving the benefit of the doubt.
I do find research is a key thing, but nothing beats experimentation either, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we just heard about an upcoming Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 5th edition, which alleges to be backwards compatible, and I'm thinking that it's going to be more like a Chaosium edition rather than, say, a D&D edition.
Yeah, you're totally right by that. I totally get that sense too.
Which is essentially, it's more of a cleaning up of the existing rules than necessarily a full new rule set. Because there are some things about Wolf Rep 4 that it's more of an accessibility issue in that everything is all over the place and it's hard to pin down all of your options. In order to be prepared for that, I'm going to wait and follow what happens. And I'm not going to be the first one to probably buy it, but I will be waiting for those key reviewers.
Yes.
To give me their insights. And I think with most game companies, they're willing to show you what the inside was. That was the got you for me for 4th edition, is that they had this amazing like flavor text promo pack that they gave out.
Yeah.
And people were showing stuff on message boards and stuff like that. And then when I got it, it was not at all what I thought it was.
I know what you mean. I absolutely agree.
And in fact, in that case, I thought it was great up until the point we played it. All right, that'll do it for now. What are we doing next week?
We have 2 possibilities, and I haven't settled on which one it's going to be. So this is an insight into the mind of what happens in the background here. But it's either going to be Street Fighter, the storytelling game, a role-playing game that is crazy. It's White Wolf, right? So it's
White Wolf.
It's got lots of, we just did White Wolf, so maybe we'll push this one back. But like, it's really cool though. And I've wanted to run a world tournament martial arts RPG for a long time. And it's like, oh, maybe this is it. So that's one. And the other might be something Napoleonic, because I have Napoleonic miniatures surrounding me right now. So maybe we'll talk about sharp practice or something. Mm-hmm. But that means I have a lot of assembly to do ahead of me. So
yeah, and it wouldn't be too bad if we ran a session of that before going into it. I'm fairly familiar with the Street Fighter one because I think I showed it to you.
You did. You introduced that to me. So yeah, so we've got a couple options. I haven't fixed on what's going to come up yet, but it'll either be an RPG or a wargame, and I can say that confidently.
All right. Well, until then, happy gaming.
Happy gaming.
We hope you enjoyed delving into today's episode. A big thanks to all of you out there for joining us. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Tales and Tactics Podcast, or on all popular podcast platforms. Join us again on the next exciting episode of Tales and Tactics.